This episode is brought to you by bewatersmart.info. Is your yard summer strong? A summer strong yard is tough enough to take the heat and still look its best. Here's 2 ways to help. First, replace your thirsty lawn with native and low water use plants and install drip irrigation and high efficiency rotor sprinklers. You'll use less water and have a healthier, happier yard. Second, here's how to help your trees grow strong enough to handle the summer heat. First, check the soil with a moisture meter or screwdriver to see if it's dry. If you need a water, set up a soaker hose or drip irrigation at the outer edges of the tree's branches. Water your trees at least once a month. Find more helpful tips and videos at bewatersmart.info.
Look at that plant. I want you to know that everything was grown in my garden. Don't touch that plant!
Is it poisonous?
She'll become part of the plant.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Flower Power Garden Hour. I'm your host, Marlene, and today we're going to talk about water-wise gardening, lawn conversions, everything about gardening in California and an area where water is important. But we'll touch upon, of course, other gardening aspects that could be spread across any realms of where you garden. So joining me is a guest who probably has the most beautiful name I've ever heard, and I'm sort of jealous. And let's see if I get this right. Soleil Tranquilli.
Soleil Tranquilli. Thanks, Marlene. That's very sweet.
I almost missed the E at the end.
I will answer to it. It's not cussing, I'll answer.
Okay. And you said that's Italian.
That's Italian.
That's
yes.
Italian. How far back? how far back were your relatives in Italy?
Grandpa came over from Florence, supposedly, but we don't know. Might be a cover story. Maybe he's a Southern Italian, but we're a little whiter up north. Apparently, I'm not sure.
Oh yes, no, that's true. Having been to multiple parts, I've been to Italy a few times. It's true, but I love how you're like he would be like, no, I'm from the northern part, and not admitting to being from the southern part. What is it about the southern parts of the country that people are?
Well, Italians were not considered white for a very long time in this country. We were, because I'm only part Italian, but there's a joke in my family about, stupid dagos and greasy wops and all of that. So we were, pretty maligned.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Oh, so what is did your grandfather garden? Is that how you got started? A lot of times there's someone in someone's family who introduced them to gardening. And then that's how they sort of got into it. But what was your journey to where you're at?
Oh, gosh, I love your question. Yeah. So it was my grandmother's.
Okay.
There are still old roses that my grandmother planted on some property up in Yuba County when the family moved to California in the 70s. And then there was the, ever-present marijuana gardens and that expertise on that side. But on the other side, my grandmother was also, doing the petunias and marigolds, and Grandpa grew, edibles and killed all the things that moved. So, and my stepfather was actually a mow and blow guy.
Okay.
Well, it was a mow and rake and sweep guy back in Reno in the day, and became a contractor and built a couple of parks. So I swore I would never, ever pull another weed, and here I freaking am.
Oh, really? Because you were put to work. Yeah, weeding was my first job, but I chose that. I can imagine having it be the family business where it's like, this is what you have to do.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love it. Yeah, so humble, right?
And you knew you wanted to continue with plants, or did you sort of veer off into a different way and then make your way back?
So how I got into horticulture is very windy and circuitous. I always loved herbs and herbal healing. Okay. So I studied that, but I didn't know much about how plants grew and where they grew and what to do with them. But I loved nature. And so I used herbs very inexpertly. And then much later, I had just some trauma and drama in my adult life. And my reaction to world events was, I didn't want to go, and I wanted to do a peaceful sort of, um, you know, up in arms, a peaceful protest. And so what I did was I went positive instead of going and screaming and yelling at city councils and, at politicians. So I took some horticulture classes, and I kind of followed the voice in my head that said, start a community garden.
Oh,
and I said, oh, what? And so I said, I have no idea what that is or why I would do that. But I started learning, and there were helpers. There was the National, I think it's the National Community Garden Association, and a lot of helpers there and expertise. And we actually, a group of us built, organized and built a community garden here in Elk Grove, and it still survives. It's a learning place and a wonderful, a center in Elk Grove where people grow in their own plots, and they donate tons and tons of food to the Elk Grove Food Bank these days. So
that's pretty amazing because that's a lot. Cool. That's a big undertaking. Because you could have even just the vision and say, want to do it and get all excited, but getting enough people around you to help you with it, that just shows you have sort of that, personality that I guess gets people drawn to you and excited about what you're doing. So kudos to you for that.
Well, I'm not sure. I think ignorance was truly bliss because it was way harder than we thought it was going to be. And longer and more expensive. But the power of groups and the power of a dream, right?
Yeah.
When you share it.
So what do you do now that you've
Yeah. So I now am a landscape designer. That tripod of a good landscape, you need you need a good design, you need a good installation, a good installment of your landscape, and then you need proper maintenance. So I'm the design aspect, but I kind of tie it all together.
Okay.
And I actually am the president of my local professional organization, Association of Professional Landscape Designers. We have a really fun and rock and roll group here that's into design, the best design and proper horticulture and trying to stay on the cutting edge and stay educated, trying to stay abreast of the changes and the new things and what we should be thinking about. Things like water resources and soil and fire-wise landscaping. And what does that look like? And who's doing it? And what are the latest thoughts? Who should we be listening to? All of that.
Yeah, because I grew up with, some of the landscaping from the 60s was still there, which was, junipers, weed fabric, the black weed fabric, and, just maybe, which, looking back, you're like, well, that was a pretty water-wise garden. Actually, that was low maintenance water-wise, but it's come a long way since then. But I'm always amazed at people who could design a garden because I think people come to me and I think because I have a garden and I grow plants, they sort of just assume that you're going to have the ability to design a garden. And for sure, I could design my garden. I have my dream garden, but it's such a slow process. It's an ever changing that the few times that people have said, hey, can you do a design for me? It's difficult for me to see it visually before I'm able to work it out. And then when someone changes it, I get so just like in love with the design I come up with. So when a client changed the design or wanted changes, it was hard for me not to go, but no, this is beautiful. How could you not like this? So
I can relate to that. I really can, Marlene. I mean, there's a little bit of, me goes into that page and that blood, sweat, and tears. I hear you.
So yeah, it's hard for me to visualize anything. And so that's why I'm always amazed when people could put it on paper, see it in their head, and then make it happen. So that's something that even if you're a plant person, just everyone keep in mind, we don't necessarily have those design skills that a designer has.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I wouldn't think that I would have been a person who could do this either. I did not arrive at the fact that this was what I was going to do until my last 2 or 3 courses. which happened to be, the design aspect of landscapes and horticulture. So that's very funny. And I just started looking at gardens, and we produced some garden tours. So I had to look at a bunch of different gardens.
Uh-huh.
We evaluated probably thousands of gardens for these greener gardens tours that we did here in Elk Grove. And then we also did 2 or 3 years in Roseville. And we just looked at them, and it got very simple and easy. So now many of us can walk onto a property and go, doop, 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 and adjust it to the client. So
nice.
It's practice.
Yeah, it's practice. But I mean, come on, you probably do have a good eye. Don't, it is an art for design. So we'll give you that, and then we'll move on. So you've seen a lot of changes, and you hit upon all the, the topics, because even though a lot of people forget, I've seen this happen where, we're in a drought and then we get a heavy rain like we did this past year, and people sort of forget that we could ever possibly not have rain again. But it's California. The way California weather is we are a dry state. We're a Mediterranean zone where it's going to be dry in the summer no matter what. And then, of course, you bring in the fire aspect. What do you think? So when you're designing, do you ever come across a client who's like, I want an English garden?
Well, they wouldn't be a client.
Okay.
They would be somebody I would be talking to on the phone.
Okay.
I get, a lot of people still want English gardens. They want a very lush tropical garden because they've been to Bali or, heartrendingly, they've been to Hawaii and they fell in love with tropical color and foliage and the richness and all of that. But what we do is we garden for place.
Yes.
So
Okay.
this is where we have the conversation of, there are things we can do to give you a more formal garden. We can do things, we can make plant choices of things that are still dry gardening for our region, but give you big, blousy blossoms.
Okay.
There's some great mallows and hibiscus that are super tough and beautiful, and they bloom every day of the year. And, so if you're interested in that, I would be your garden designer. But if you're not, somebody else will surely be able to help you.
Well, that's what
I will be sad.
That's what I'm thinking is I think when people see like, English garden or tropical garden, that, they may think it's just, well, why can't I have that? And then you have to, lots of water. But yeah, it's good that you start telling them, yes, we can sort of do that if you're willing to maybe taper it back a bit. And then here's your choices for the tropical plants. And here's your choices for getting that English garden look. I still try to strive for that English garden, but our English garden peak comes at, April, May, and then the summer, it's not looking so English garden like.
Well, okay. So I think that you and I probably use this term a lot, climate appropriate, and then you apply formal or casual to it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So do a lot of your clients, are they doing the lawn conversions, or are they moving away from the lawns?
Yeah. I sort of have the reputation as the anti-lawn.
Okay.
Satan, as it were.
Okay.
But I have been getting a lot of new information, and I like to stay flexible, and I like to leave space for new developments and ways that we can get what we want and still be climate appropriate, wean ourselves off of water and create a really healthy environment in our gardens. For ourselves, our pets, our kids and grandkids, our neighbors, and the wildlife, the pollinators, and make these gorgeous neighborhoods, a place you want to be. So I have been working with the city of Sacramento on rebate program.
Okay.
And, that's another one where it's quick and dirty. You don't get a lot of time. People don't have a lot of money. It's a lot of DIY, and there's not a lot of time to explain these small water cycle ideas and, irrigation, updates and upgrades. And and how important your soil is and all of that. It's just like, yeah, give me my plants, lady, and get out of here. I want to start.
Yeah. Yeah. So when someone is taking, I think we discussed this, briefly when we were chatting on the phone, that I think some people think that it's so daunting to remove the lawn and it's going to be so expensive. And what are some of the ways that you approach like removing a lawn or killing off a lawn and transitioning it to plants? Do you always just rip it up? Do you tell the client, hey, look, just turn your sprinklers off for a bit, it's going to die down? I'm sure it's a lot, it's space by space, situation because of if you have a slope or whatever. But what are some ways that people could maybe not be, if they're going to do it themselves, be not so scared of having to get heavy equipment in, do all the physical labor?
Well, so there are a few different options, and I'll talk about the very most exciting one last, but right now, my contractor, his way is to take the soil down. So he'll go in and whatever you have, it's a nice, healthy, green, lush lawn that you want to get rid of. We'll do ground covers. I like to work in natives. Obviously, we're trying to go with a lot more city than just a lawn monoculture, to make everybody happy who is a flyer or a crawler and, the Furbies and all that. Or sometimes people can just mulch it out. It depends on what you have there. So it really is a case-by-case basis. Some of the things that people have a lot of trouble with is the Bermuda grass because it's almost impossible to get rid of. You know that, and you have to kind of patrol everything to keep your neighbors out of your yard if you've renovated yours out, right? It's like it's never gone.
So I just want to go, when you say mulch out, does that literally mean you're just putting such a heavy layer of mulch on it, you're smothering the grass and all that is turning into organic material?
Yeah, if you have a pretty nice lawn that doesn't have things like
Bermuda,
the sedge, and the Bermuda, then you can do that. The nut sedge is edible. Those little nutlets, those are edible. So I actually don't have a problem with those, but those are hard to get rid of.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because if you let them go to seed, but then also the the nutlets, the tubers will just multiply. So,
Marlene, in some of the older neighborhoods, I kind of scout things out during the process of design, and hopefully it's several weeks so I can kind of see what's successively filling in the weeds. But sometimes I miss it. Those little nut sedges, they can be beds down 2-3 feet in the soil, like entire beds.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah. That's
those
crazy.
older gardens.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm a fan of, if you can stand it, if you just kind of go with that, you've already got it. Why do we have to destroy the soil? Why do we have to cart it all away? Right. Yeah. So if you can go with that, let's not poison it. Let's go with it and let's add some other things. And maybe you weed whack it a couple of times a year before it goes to seed or something. But yeah, Bermuda's the ugly one. But generally, how we did it is we removed the lawn with the sod cutter.
Okay.
And then we carted it off,
Okay. Yeah.
Very sad because my soil was gorgeous.
Yeah.
And all that topsoil.
Yeah, I know.
I wept, right? It's ridiculous. And then we just layered compost and mulch on for 8 years because we were poor.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
And then my contractor said, all right, we're going to build you a garden. I can't stand this. So he came in and built us a beautiful garden. And, I'm very lucky to have him. But I think that you can do that as a DIY as well. I am not a fan of carting off the soil. I think the soil is a big fat deal. I think soil is, let's not compact it with a bunch of equipment. Let's see if we can work with that. What if we can do some berming for a rain garden, do some contouring, grab that water off the roof, right?
Yeah. But it's people cut their lawns and then the green materials, you say, oh, it's green manure, it's nitrogen. So imagine just letting everything die, all the roots and that it's just organic material and all the earthworms and the microorganisms that are in it. So I think it's maybe people want to remove it to have that instant wow factor. And I get that too. You're paying money or you're changing your lawn out and you don't want to just see something dead or you want to see.
Yeah.
But, I tell people you'd even scrape the grass up if you want and flip it over. And it's, then it looks like dirt instead of the grass and it's still there. So there's many ways, but I think it's important to tell people that you don't have to cart it off and remove it. In fact, like as you were saying, that's sort of sad to do. So if you can, just let it die, put mulch over it, maybe, or just dig holes and plant in it. Have you ever done that?
I have a neighbor who did that.
Okay.
It's a little weird.
Yeah.
It's a one of everything kind of garden, which is not my design dream.
Yeah.
But when I get over myself, I go, hey, he didn't hire anybody. He's just doing what he wants to do. Well, why am I here judging that?
Yeah.
I would get judged as a horticultural professional in the design aspect. Like, what the heck are you thinking? But yeah, he's not me.
Yeah.
I think the thing to think about when you're going in and you're layering, what you want to do with that layering, with that, 1 to 3 inches of compost, you're wanting to give something to feed the top layers of the soil, and then those layers of hopefully arborist mulch, to kind of cap it off and get that biology working back again away from the monoculture. The thing is that's pretty tall, 1 to 3 inches of compost and then 4 inches of mulch.
Yeah.
Fresh out of the wheelbarrow. That could be, half a foot. So you got to figure out something to do at the edges, right? Or else you're going to be managing mulch every time it rains or a dog or a kid kicks it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you got to figure that out. So sometimes we dig a little, shovel wide little ditch there so the mulch can run into there. But, these all things are handled. We can handle these things. We have to figure them out.
Yeah.
My most exciting thing that I can't wait to share, I can't wait to try it. I wish I'd known about this before we renovated our front yard, is the concept of working with your weeds. And basically, they're calling it rewilding. And you're going away from the monoculture of lawn. That's just one plant, right? Diversity is dead there and your soil is not happy. And what we do is we're mowing it really short. And then in the winter, we're reseeding it with things like native grasses and forbs, wildflowers, things like plantains and yarrow and, all those sorts of things. Traditionally, what we would call weeds, what we've been trained to call weeds. But that's just so we can get chemical companies to, sell us things to kill them.
Yeah.
They're not weeds. They belong here and they have a purpose and they will kind of work through their own succession. And this is exciting to me because you get diversity. You're getting something that you don't have to cart off the soil. You're not taking away all those soil microbes on the top, right?
Yeah.
And
it looks beautiful.
Yeah, what do you
too.
think?
No, I think that's a great idea. It's sort of, it's sort of goes back to, well, if you don't want to get rid of your lawn, you could just, dig a hole and plant, but this is much easier and it's more cohesive looking. It's because I've personally have always loved a lawn when there's been the little English daisies popping up in it, but people are so trained to think that anytime they have anything that's not of the same exact lawn species they have, they need to nuke it and get rid of it. And I've never, even when I see a lawn, I'm like, okay, there's different grasses in there. So I think that's a great idea because things are going to bloom at different times and you're going to have just food for pollinators. And what also it's doing is you have, like you mentioned, the plantain, you're going to have like a deeper taproot that's going to start tapping into that compact soil. So if you do eventually want to take your lawn out or you add more things, your soil is actually not going to be as compact. So you have different root systems that are working to help break up your soil. But yeah, I mean, so how would someone go about that? You said plant in the fall, just sort of cast these seeds over.
Yeah. Well, I haven't done this, but I've been following the work of a pretty amazing designer and contractor, Pamela Burstler, who I met through APLD, which I love, that we have these forward thinkers. So she's got kind of a little recipe for it, but I don't know what the seed mix would be for Northern California Valley, but I have some guesses. And it sounds like a little bit about some of these, like the Bellis perennis English daisy and the plantain. Sounds like you have experiences.
Well, I mean, the English daisy is considered a weed, but I don't think it's a weed.
Me either. They're sweet, right?
Yeah, they're beautiful. They're so cute.
Yeah.
The plantain can be, quote, a weed, but it loves wet spots. So generally, if you tell someone, oh, you have that as a weed, it's usually you're watering too much or you have poor drainage in there, but it's not horribly invasive. The yarrow, that is a native. I could see growing that, but then having to mow it down to keep it. Like these things could be mowed down too. So if they were getting too tall and you wanted that uniform look, you could just mow them down. I had a gal who but was doing it with bulbs. She was back east, so it was a little bit different, zone 9, but they would plant very small spring growing bulbs just in the lawn. So in the spring, you'd have just a mass of bulbs in your lawn and then they die down.
Yeah.
And then you could have your grass for the summertime. So I thought, well, that's a great idea as well. So it's almost using like the lawn as sort of a blank canvas to do what you want while keeping the lawn if you want to.
Yeah. What's interesting, I love the bulb thing too. I kind of specialize in bulbs.
Oh, okay.
In meadows and stuff like
great.
that. I'm kind of self-taught. So I'm always looking for people who are doing it, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you know? What can you tell me? But I love that. Like right now, the naked ladies are out, right? And they're looking all crystalline and pink just in time for Barbie movie, right? But and then they die back. All these bulbs have died back. The native California poppies have died back. Well, I'm going to take all of those, and the dry grasses. I'm going to take them and kind of break them up in my hands, all those dead foliage pieces, and I'll just layer them on as mulch in other places or in my rain garden.
Yeah.
So we're keeping that, and we're keeping it on property, and we're putting it back into the soil. So Pamela has this way that she does it. You can get, so here's the thing. Instead of like $20 a square, $10 to $12 a square foot, upwards of crazy other amounts. This particular sort of rewilding the lawn, you don't have to call away the soil. You don't have to cut out your sod. You might want to change your pop-ups to 6-inch risers. And of course, you would go as efficient as possible because that's always part of our equation, right? Nowadays, we talk about as efficient as you can. But basically, she said, cut your lawn to 2 inches, dethatch it, core aerate it.
Yes.
Contour, yes, right? Contour that soil for water capture. So you're going to do little berms and places to grab and hold that water, because we are thinking of our soil as a sponge. It's not just what we see on top. We're thinking of the soil as our canvas, and that's going to support our plant life, our trees, all of that. Then she does a compost with her cover seed at 1/4 inch, and it's a whole other animal what the cover seed is. And then she likes to hand water. You get germination. And then she does a spray or overhead irrigation. And you mow it at about 4 to 6 inches, but you don't mow it on a regular schedule. You want to keep it irregular. Okay. And she likes to mow it monthly or every 6 weeks. And she alternates mow patterns. So she doesn't want you to overwater. She's looking for diversity. So, instead of like 5 different ground covers that I typically used to use in a garden.
Yeah.
She's looking for 30, 10 to 30 types of seeds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
it's super exciting.
Yeah, a few things I want to touch upon there is just dethatching for people who don't know. They might be like, what's dethatching? Can you go into that and your technique for dethatching and why? When you're putting seed down, that's important.
Well, okay. Look, I'm not a lawn person, so I barely know how to talk about thatching and core aeration. But basically, lawn people will tell you that thatch is the dead grass that builds up at the base of the plant, the grass plant, and it builds up and builds up, and it kind of keeps. It kind of is an impermeable layer after a while. So we want to open that up, and we can actually take that thatch out and use it other places. You can leave it on top. You can leave it as mulch. The aeration is a way, and I think there's some studies out that say that aeration can recompact your soil. Some people are saying don't do it, but she's still saying do it, and she's coming from a farming thing right now. So aeration is just where we go in and we remove a little core of the soil and pop it out. And that's so air and water can get down into the soil. And it can get filled up with compost. You can, the seeds will fall into there, all of that. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds, perfect. So for dethatching, I've always, like the few times I've done it on where was I? I think it was when I worked at the Winchester Mystery House. There were like 11 lawns we had to dethatch. Yeah. And I think it was there's dethatching machines, but just take a hard landscaping rake and go over it gently back and forth. And you just get big chunks, big areas coming up. So, but it's sort of fun. Once you do an area, you're like, ooh, look at all that I got up. And, the aeration, I've always been, everyone knows if you're walking along grass and you're like, what are these? Is this poo? What is this? Because it's just
little cylinders of clay, like, in my neighborhood, it's all clay, right?
Yeah. And that's just so you have a space for the seed to adhere. And like you said, air and water to go through. And then she lays the seed down and then does a top dressing of a compost, it sounds like.
Well, you're going to lay the seed in with, it's mixed with compost. Okay. And it is a lot of seed.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot of seed because you've got, and she's giving some. What she got? Just came out of a really long workshop.
Okay. Yeah, because I imagine you have to sort of make your own mixes.
What's that?
It would be hard to find a mix. I mean, there are mixes out there, but none quite like that, I imagine.
Well, yes. And it's really hard to find bulk seed, especially for native grasses and things like that for California. I mean, there are businesses like Delta Bluegrass that have specialized in that, and they have their native, they create, they produce seed for their no-mow blends and things like that. So I think this is just a really new idea. And, there's certain percentages of, let's see, she wants 1 to 4 pounds of seed per thousand square foot of lawn area. Okay. So, and you're going to use a cubic yard of compost.
Okay.
I know, right? It's a lot.
Yeah. Do you see yourself incorporating that into a client's yard if they're game? Because I think that would be a little hard to convince. I think it'd have to be a particular client who'd be willing for that.
Well, I think there's a couple of different types of folks that might be interested in that. Because we're getting very close on the state level to lawns going away. I mean, it's happening already institutionally. CMPS has something up for, business properties and things like that. So I imagine that very soon we might just have new lawns, or maintained lawns at parks and, places where we're using them in sports fields and things like that. So we got to come up with other ways. Yeah. So I think people who are into natives or who love who are hikers and things like that, outdoorsmen might really kind of love this idea of diversity and pollinators and things like that. And maybe some of the folks who are dead set on the emerald green look might be talked into it if it's something that they could play with, and they could keep the lawn and layer in some other things as the water goes away. So Pamela's thing is that the most you would ever water this in the summer would be one time a week. And I think that's even in the valley.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. I could see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we got to come up with some different seeds, but I certainly, there's some things I think about. I think about yarrow. I think about, the little English daisies and the clovers.
I'm trying to think of things that are really small. I mean, I some of these grasses are taller. I'm thinking like the blue-eyed grass, the Sassafras, but that might get a little too tall when it blooms. My thing is you're like, oh, I don't want to mow it because it's blooming.
It's pretty.
Yeah.
Well, and you can mow around things. You can put off mowing. One of the things, if you mow it too much, you'll get a different mix if you let it go to seed.
Yeah.
Some things might not get to grow and flower and go to seed.
And that's what
right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You're going to have eventually certain ones are going to want to overtake. Like we have flax in one of our native gardens.
Cool.
But man, that alone could just be a whole lawn, but I mean, not because it's taller, but that thing takes over like crazy. So I could just see something allowed to go to seed sort of dominating, which isn't bad, but it just,
it's not.
You just sort of want that mixture of stuff. So it might require a little taming down the road.
What were you saying? I'm sorry.
I said it might require a little taming down the road.
Well, I think there's refinements and we can learn about things. So already, a couple of the options that I still use for people who like that even look, I use ground covers. So Myoporum is one for larger areas. God forbid you have to keep cutting it off your edges and, fighting it back, so it doesn't grab your children, right?
Yeah.
But Demondia is a wonderful one. It's a little slow and sometimes it doesn't always take. Gazanias. I've already been thinking about what to overseed Carapia with, in the winter. Like maybe we could do clover. Yeah. Right?
So, can you go into that a little bit more? The Carapia,
it's a thought.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
What do you think? Talk to me. What are you asking?
Yeah, people love that. But can you just talk a little bit about the Carapia, Lipia a little bit and how you apply it and use it? Do you have full lawns with it?
So I think that the problem with it is that it doesn't look that great in the winter.
Okay.
Usually. And it also kind of gets a little fluffy. So people are scared.
Okay.
It's like a rising tide, right? Oh my God.
Okay.
And I also think that if there's a bee phobia, then that kind of kills the idea right there. So I love the idea. But I had a garden here in Elk Grove that had Carapia naturally. I was like, well, we already decided we were going to do it in the backyard. And I walked out there and there it was.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We don't know how it got back there. And they're like, yeah, cool. Okay, fine. We don't care. We're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because, that seems to be everyone's favorite or the idea of it because it stays so low and it takes sun and shade for the most part.
A little bit. Huh?
A little bit, yeah. But in the winter, a lot of things get hit by the cold. And I like your Myoporum. Myoporum's a great ground cover, full sun. Yeah. It's a little thicker. So it's not a lawn substitute unless it's not a lawn substitute per walking on it, I should say. But it's great for areas where you just want to cover a big area, holding up a small hill or something. The Diamondias.
Yeah, I like that.
I like Diamondia. It's a beautiful and it's so flat, but it's slow growing. And here in the Central Valley, I don't think it likes the full sun. I don't know. That's my experience.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah. And sometimes it can get a little funky thing where it just kind of dies back. And then you're like, oh, I got to add more. But I like it for small spaces. It's very petite, right?
Yeah. Between stepping stones or just as an accent. Yeah. No, it's pretty nice. because it has that two-toned color. And then I don't think people even realize gazanias are considered like a ground cover because they could take over, but they're clumps, but they can form a ground cover, as I know at work because we were just ripping huge sections out of the South African section of them because they're from South African. So we planted them and now they're so. And what are your other go-to? I think you said you had 5, did you say, or are those your favorite?
Oh, I don't think I gave a number.
Okay.
So, I do love, well, I do kind of a tapestry thing. Like I did a drivable, driveway.
Oh,
like
okay.
So we did lamb's ear, and we did, we did, yarrow, and there's a couple of others. Maybe I put a couple of crappia in there. I can't really remember.
Because there's short yarrow too. A lot of people I think are thinking of the tall yarrow, but there's some pretty short yarrows.
Yeah, there's some tiny ones, and it's fine, and these guys, they weren't going to use it all the time. They just wanted to be able to drive into the backyard every once in a while to switch out a vehicle. So we didn't even put, the Hollywood strips or anything. Yeah. And it's really pretty. I mean, it's just like a little tapestry. And we just said, hey, we're going to see what loves it there and see how they fill in. Okay. And, let them duke it out. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's a fun thing, just incorporating, because to the eye, you're going to have all these different visuals. And it's true, if you're not sure which one's going to like, and even within that area, there's going to be little, even microclimates. If you have a little wall right there, the sun's hitting it, one may like that heat more than the other one. So, if you can, just try different things out. So those are your favorite ground covers. So we might as well just ask you, what are some of your favorite natives to incorporate?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say yarrow is always my go-to as somebody really interested in herbalism and plant medicines. I make flower essences as well. So yarrow is a really big deal in the plant, in the herbal world, and also in the flower essences. With flower essences, it's known sort of all the different yarrows, all the different colors and stuff are known as kind of a grounding and clearing for having been on computers and, watching screens and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a base, a stabilizing thing. And I think of it as that in the garden too, right?
Yeah, it's just sort of there. I guess it's just sort of a sturdy plant that you're like, hey, the yarrow's going to be fine. I don't need to do anything. So
yeah, I love it. I always love the blue fescue. Yeah, I use that in little patches. My dog loves to lay in it. It's her favorite spot. Oh yeah.
I could see, I mean, it's beautiful, and it does add that architectural interest and that color, that blue color. So I could see how that could be really utilized in sort of a landscaping design.
It's pretty soft too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and it gives you that cooling effect that you're kind of looking for in Sacramento. But you have to kind of be careful. It does not like those hot, reflective sunny edges.
Because sometimes they'll just die off in the center. And
yes, they do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I've never known if that was just poor drainage, or they sort of are a short-lived perennial, or if it's the stress of the heat over time just sort of weakens them. So, but yeah, just FYI for it's not you, it's them. If they, after 5 years, you start seeing some of them die off.
It's true. And I do sort of layer a few in every couple of years. I'm not going to lie. And I also have them go to seed. So I think the trick with those two is just to know, it's not us. I also believe that these varieties of the blue fescues, there's so many. I feel like the seed gets mixed up. I feel like, the Elijah Blue is supposed to be the one that's the low water, and all the rest of them are moderate water users. But I just think they're all tossed into in a bucket, and we get what we get. I've got to tell you.
You're probably right, because they look very similar. And so when you have a plant that's so similar, no one's doing genetic testing on them. So yeah, all it takes is one mislabeled and stuff. So
you get what you
yeah,
get.
yeah.
Anyway, I think grasses are my favorite. I
Really?
love,
Okay.
there's another little Atlas fescue that's more golden, which I love. I have a small dog. And, I love having her out with me. And so grasses are something that I've seen dogs hanging out in. And so I have a small dog, so I have small grasses, right?
Yeah,
I love those.
I always, I think when people think grasses, they think of the purple fountain grass, which isn't native and was planted so much, or they think of the big giant miscanthus and which could take over. But you're mentioning some of these small ones, which they're cute. You could utilize those in your yard and they're not going to take over.
The Atlas fescue is not native, but it can certainly go into a native garden. I'm a big fan of like meadows too, Marlene.
Yeah, I have a friend who did a native meadow. Meadows are tough to do because they're hard to establish. And usually then you have something that's a little bit taller that might shade everything out. And then you get the weeds because you do have open spaces. So,
well, when you think about this rewilding recipe, Pamela's seed recipe is 48 to 50% grasses.
Okay. So it does look like a meadow.
And this is talking about succession.
Okay.
Not only the seed bank that's already in the garden, if you're not going to rip out your soil, like I'm trying to move to, right?
Yeah.
So we can leave our soil, but we're also leaving that seed bank that's just sitting there for, if your house is older, your neighborhood is older, 100 years. In my neighborhood, it's about 50, 60 years. That's sitting there and just waiting as soon as you move the topsoil off of it or you run a shovel or a rake through it. Those grasses are going to come up, but we kind of want those. We want the brassicas, we want the mustards, we want those things to grow and to have their day. And then eventually you'll go from, the grasses and the bacterial type soils, and you'll succeed through to a soil that's more fungal and that can hold up for our woodies, which, I love my woody shrubs. I love my coffee berry and my non-native woodies that are herbal, our rosemaries and our, I do love my Davis Gold toyons and things like that.
So when you say going from bacterial to fungus, you mean getting the mycorrhizae back in there that a lot of them, like a lot of shrubs, utilize. And so it's sort of a symbiotic relationship there. Yeah, I love that. I love the yellow toyon. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that one's very much I think all toyons are underutilized personally, but the gold one especially so.
I love it. I appreciate that it's a little narrower and taller than the species. And I've heard from some folks who do grow it that the birds love the golder ones better. I don't know if that's true, but you got to plant stuff for the birds.
Yeah.
Find a spot that's not over a driveway or a walkway right into the house and plant those bearing shrubs. And this is the other reason why, taking care of the soil and creating that sponge and that succession of lower plants, grasses on up through the weeds and stuff will help support those woodies a little bit better. And you get, instead of ripping off all the soil, throwing down our compost like we do professionally, and then going, grow a coffee berry, boom, that's not how it works in nature.
No.
You don't get that. You start with your forbs and your grasses after a fire, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And they're going to break the soil up. They're going to die down and add more nutrients. And do you ever plant design with manzanita?
I love manzanitas in the wild. Manzanitas and ceanothus are hard.
They are.
I just find that the way we're doing it now for the native gardens, they don't last very long. And I'm very frustrated because I think they're an important piece of, what needs to be layered back in. So,
well, I think this is, it's every time you see a native list or you see natives, ceanothus always makes the list. And I include it in my talks, my WaterWise talks, but only include it because I know people are going to ask, well, where's ceanothus? And every time I ask, I said, who's had a ceanothus? Who's had a ceanothus die in 7 years? Or, within.
Yeah.
And I know there are some that don't, but for the most part, there's so many that do just, that clay soil over time, the winter standing water. And it's sad because I had a friend who had 2 as a focal point against this beautiful wall, and they both just died. And it's like, from a design aspect, if it's planted as a focal, because they grow so big and they look so beautiful, and then they'll die overnight on you.
And it's a loss, right? You're mourn that.
Yes. Oh, yeah, for sure, because you've got attached to it. You're like, this is the first thing that blooms in spring. I love it. It's the foundation of my garden. And then manzanita, it's unless you have perfectly sloping soils or great drainage, it's really tough. And I see people planting it, and then I see it gone because it just doesn't work so great. So I just wanted your opinion on that to see if there was any particular varieties you've messed with or played with that you've had success. But overall, your thoughts are the same as mine. Your experience is the same as mine.
So I try to use the ones that say they're more garden worthy, they're more garden tolerant, so that we can. And I tell people this is not a forever plant.
Yeah.
But let's talk about flannel bush. How many of us have dreamed of a lovely flannel bush? Damn, there's a garden. There's a park out on the Delta. I just ran into this photograph that has a frickin' Fremontodendron tree in the middle of lawn in it.
There's always always the exceptions to rules, and you just shake your head or you're
and
talking
like,
and what is going on with that? Maybe there's a giant cavity underneath where it's just all the water's draining out, but I know. And that's sad too when they go. There was one at the UC Davis Arboretum that was just so beautiful, and then just 1 year died.
Yeah.
So I like your term. It's not a forever plant, because we think, we're going to invest in this woody plant and it's going to grow and grow and grow. But some of them, if you desperately do want some of these that are a little more finicky, that don't like your drainage, they may not. I mean, you want something to last, I wouldn't recommend planting something that's not going to last a year or two, but Fremontodendrons, they can last a certain number of years, but by then it's so sad. You've gotten so attached to it that then it...
Yeah, you have made me very sad all of a sudden, Marlene. I'm like, and this one died and that one. Well, yeah. And then, can we talk about how slow red buds grow?
Okay.
I love a red bud, right? I love our native, and they're so slow. And people are like, yeah, you sold me on this, but look at it. Just look at it. And,
Yeah, they're great trees. Unfortunately, there's no perfect tree out there. So, a lot of people are like, but the pods, but I'm like, at least they're dry. Right. It could be a berry that drops on you. Or you could say, if someone says, look how slow growing, you could just tell them, at least it's not a blue oak, because those are so slow growing.
Yeah. Well, and I have gone, can we talk about trees? Because, for people who are super on a budget and they want to do something to contribute, because everybody can do something. We agree, right?
Yes.
If you own property and you have license to make a change, and it's just you, yourself, and your family or whatever, you can do a thing. And a thing you could do, just an idea. See, I want to talk this over with you, Marlene. See what you think. Mulch your lawn out and plant a freaking tree.
Yeah.
Plant a tree.
Yeah. Works for me.
Because, how many trees did we lose earlier this year in those crazy winds that came from different directions?
So horrible.
And people are, people in my neighborhood are still cutting trees down. Perfectly good trees, Atlas cedars. They didn't. Oh my gosh, giant trees that the owls, the owls would come in on. Even trees that I wasn't particularly fond of, but they were doing their job. Pistachios and even redwoods. There's nothing wrong with these trees, and they just cut them because they got scared, and nobody's replanting them. And it's getting hot here, Marlene. It's getting really hot.
Yeah, I like your point. I think we've done. The plant world has, and especially the tree people, educators, have done such a good job of telling people what trees are, don't have the invasive roots, are a good size for your yard. And it's true, but what that's prevented is people just planting these giant trees. So now we're all going to have trees the size of crepe myrtles or Western redbuds, which is great. And I get it. You don't want to plant, you don't want to plant a mulberry in your front lawn and have all, these roots ripping up your sidewalk. But when you look at some of those trees that are ripping up the sidewalk, those are the majestic trees that you're like, that's a beautiful tree. I'm glad someone planted that, even though it's ripping everything up, and hopefully not that person's foundation. But I think we're past that, and we're gonna lose those really giant oaks and trees because people are afraid, but we also know better to a certain sense. So it's a balance.
Well, it's so hot out there, and I just think about all these exposed corners and streets.
Yeah.
I live in suburban Elk Grove in an older neighborhood. And a lot of times, even if the tree is still there, they're taking out the lawn and they're putting in rock mulches or synthetic turf over these trees.
Yeah.
And it's killing me. It's just killing me. So if it's 108 outside, your rock mulch is going to be about 150, 165 degrees.
Oh, yeah. That's just
your synthetic
so hot.
turf is not far behind. It's about 150 to 160 as well.
Is it really? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, your asphalt, right, is about 160. Yeah. Even Bermuda grass is about 100 degrees.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Give or take. I mean, you can test this. Go get a.
No, I believe you. I'm just, it's strange about the Bermuda, but I've never understood the rock. I understand it because it's just easy, but I don't understand why it can't just be wood chips or something. But, the rock, it's just so hot looking at it. I wouldn't want to come home to look at a yard that just has rock. I just get hot thinking about it. But planting a tree, and it's not going to cost a lot of money. It doesn't need a lot of water, and you don't need to plant a giant tree, but I like that idea. And then just put mulch around it, and you're done. There's your front yard.
You need to water it.
Yeah. Well, water to establish it, but not nearly as much as, say, any herbaceous plants or even, so yeah.
Do you have a favorite tree, Marlene?
I would say that I am partial to the Chinese pistache in the fall around here. The colors are just amazing. I mean, I love a beautiful redwood tree, but those are tough. Do not recommend planting those here just because they're the opposite. Their roots are very shallow. And I think it's more of the not even having a favorite tree, but it's the structure of trees. When I see a beautiful, I mean, I love the smell of camphor trees. There's two giant ones right by my work, and it's the most fragrant thing in flower and when I run over the dry leaves. So I get out of my car to go to work and I just get this waft of camphor, but they're not the best. They're not the best trees. And I would never recommend someone planting one because they're huge. But
I've seen them rip up sidewalks.
Oh, yeah.
And shred them.
Oh, yeah. And the limbs just, they are more weak limbed trees. So I think it's, every tree has its beauty, but it's the right plant in the right place. I think it's the what tree I do recommend to most people, and I will say is probably crepe myrtle or redbud, because most people have smaller yards and they can't have a big tree, and they tend to be, or even the desert willow, the dark purple Chalopsis one, that which is not planted enough in my opinion.
Right. So. That's the one that I like Bubba. She's a little brighter, Barbie pink now.
Yeah.
I have one in my front yard, and you get those hummingbird moths on them and the hummers on them.
Yep.
And
the bumblebees.
There is a lot of like confetti from the blossoms, but so sue-me, man. I love it.
Yeah. I know that no tree is going to not have a mess. So that's
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to touch upon some of your fire-wise landscaping. So is it sort of your water-wise? I imagine it carries over to the same for the fire. So when you go do you do specific designs for people up in the hills or who are concerned about fires? And what are some tips?
Yeah, so I am trained in it. I haven't really done a lot of it.
Okay.
Usually for the foothills, I have a friend who is a wonderful designer and arborist up in the foothills. And I refer clients to her if
Okay.
they have property up there because she's really good at both.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also trained in Firewise. And she actually, her house got burnt all the way around in the Caldor fire. Did not get burnt, but it started near her, burnt up, and came back around. So
Okay.
she lives with that threat. And
Yeah.
it's kind of broken down into zones, and it's not so much the types of plants or what you plant, although, eucalyptus, don't do it.
Yeah.
But get rid of a lot of voluminous dry understory weeds, and keep that zone 1 right around the house, keep it clean. There's a lot of things you need to do to your house to fire safe it.
Yeah.
And then we also are looking at approaches. Can you get out a back way from your property? Can the fire engine find you? I mean, there's just some practical common sense things. There's some wonderful books out there as well.
Yeah.
But I talk to people and they just aren't scared enough yet. Even people, on just some, out in, my friend lives in Harold. And she said, well, this weekend, a neighbor's, one of the kids said, Mom, Grandma, it's fires over there. And they watched it and they said, the wind's blowing away from us. And I said, ooh, you better think about a second, exit. You better figure out exit plan for the animals,
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, because a lot of people out in the country, they have the animals, and it's getting yourself out. But and then it's that one way in and one way out. So you don't want to sort of lock yourself in with this landscaping in the back that you can't get out. So that's a good idea. Yeah, I had
and it's
I was gonna say I had a fire landscape person on before, and it was just amazing, but it was weird how it was sort of like balancing, like here, as we're taking apart our garden, we're told leave some debris, you could have a little bit of a mess for the animals for overwintering, but then if you're in a fire region, you're just like clear everything off of the ground.
Because you can have a dry winter and everything goes up and you won't know. And so yes, there's some new rules, and we don't like to clear everything and cut everything down, but there are some figures for how close trees can grow to your roof and your house, and how you group them, and then just keeping what you do have moist. That's, but how, but if you, it's what do you do on fire day if you don't have electricity to pump? I mean, there's just a lot of things to think about. And so somebody else has done the sort of checklist. And I would just warn people away from the plants that are good for fire safe gardens and the plants that aren't. I mean, use your common sense. Things are full of, resins and volatile oils like, pines and eucalyptus. That's a no-no.
Yeah, it's going to go up very fast.
Keep those away or don't plant them. If they don't grow naturally, don't put them in your garden.
Yeah, but I've always wondered sort of about the salvias too, like Salvia clevelandia. I guess it's such a small shrub. I mean, it's so high in oils, but I guess it's not a huge tree. So I don't know, because that's where it's sort of like a lot of these natives have a lot of these oils in them too. But, I guess it's maybe having a break between them and not only just having those. You could have maybe a few, but don't just have all of it. But then trees, that's a problem, because those are what's going to cause a lot of flames.
So you do little islands of plants and mixtures, and grasses are kind of a no-no. So it is a different palette, and they want everything clean in zone 1 right against the house, which is traditionally what we used to use that space for foundation shrubs to hide, the foundation. So you have to think about it differently. Maybe that's where your patio is,
Yeah. And I can see how that's hard when people, but I want plants up against my house. No, you can't.
Yeah.
I guess if it was my house and there's, I guess it is worth it not, because it can definitely help. So,
I guess what we all are dealing with whether you're in the industry as a professional and an expert or as a customer and a client, we're all dealing with a changing palette here of what works and what doesn't work. I mean, we have drought, we have flooding, we have fire, and everything that we do on our property in our landscapes matters. And, the big thing is to plant appropriately and get some help, get some suggestions. You don't have to have a full-blown design, but get some experts out there to give you a consultation and look for people who have some training and who have some experience. Maybe they live in fire country. I personally don't live in fire country, so I know of other people who are better at this.
Yeah.
So I refer them out because I don't have that experience.
Yeah. That's why I always told people with deer. I'm like, I've never lived where there's deer. I'm the worst, last person to ask about what deer want to eat or not. So speaking of that, where can people, you mentioned a few organizations, but where could people look to find designers like yourself who are certified and have had the training? Is there an online site people could look for?
Yeah, well, we have a wonderful organization called Association of Professional Landscape Designers, and our California chapter is awesome. It's APLD, CA for California.org. And there is the first thing that pops up when you go to apldca.org is find a designer. So you can search by name, you can search by zip code. We're a very small district up here. We have just under 20 people that are members.
Okay.
But you can find folks all over California and actually all over the nation where landscape designers can work. And we're a pretty great bunch. We're silly, we're earthy, we're very interested in cutting edge design, but practical. We're some of the most, best educated and practical folks out there, where the contractors are out there just doing the installs. A lot of them aren't getting the education. And that's where we bring that into the client and educate them what to ask for.
Yeah. So it's definitely, like you said, someone doesn't need to use a designer, but maybe you could incorporate them. I'm sure there are some who maybe just do plant lists maybe for a fee.
Absolutely. There's levels of design, Marlene. You don't have to have a full several page, formal design. You can do a quick sketch, or people can give you a plant list. Marcia's really good at that. My friend up in the foothills, she's got her zone 7 trees and stuff, and she'll tell you,
wow,
you're going to have to get this thing a little extra water, or, the deer like that one. I wouldn't do it.
Finding people in your area who are dealing with what you're dealing with, that's great knowledge to have.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this has been really educational, and I like the whole idea. I mean, every time someone comes up with a new idea of how to get people maybe interested in not having their grass, but still have their grass.
So do it now before you have to.
Yes.
Before you can't water it at all. There could be, there is a time coming. I just guarantee you, we won't be allowed to water grass.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm on with you where we'll need it for certain things like, parks, but business parks shouldn't have it. I don't necessarily think front yards should have it. It's hard to tell someone with kids, not to have an area to go run and play, because that was some of my childhood memories, is playing on the lawn. But we don't need it everywhere. So,
but kids seem to like these more diverse yards.
Yeah.
They love rain gardens. They love, Cleveland sage, the remnants of the flowers, how they are now. They make fairy wands. They run around. They hide and seek behind the grasses, and kids and animals love it.
Yeah. No, they could adapt, and it probably is healthier. Well, it is healthier. So no, I definitely, I mean, I think that's a given. I'm surprised we're not already there. That lawn isn't, basically banned. I mean, I hate to say that, banning a plant, banning grass.
What is banned though? It is illegal to run water in the gutter from your irrigation. Yeah. And that's been true for several years.
Okay. Well, good.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. And I'm telling because I live out in the country, I don't have neighbors, but the first thing I pulled up to my friend's house and I looked at their neighbors and it was like just this geyser. And I'm like, first thing I said is like, you do know your neighbor's just gushing water. And she's like, oh, is it still going? I'm like, well, yeah, didn't you tell them they're gushing water?
Yeah.
So, yeah, being the water police. Don't want to be that, but, it is silly.
Oh, well, it's okay. It's actually a service. And, a lot of times the water agencies will, they want to know so they can help people, get the help or reset their irrigation clocks.
And, that's a big one. People
come
don't
into
even know.
compliance. Yeah.
So,
So,
where can
they'll help
people, do you have social media or do you have any sites that you want to promote for yourself?
Well, you can find me. I'm on Facebook only. I'm not super good at social media and all that stuff. But Tranquil Gardens, 2 L's and an S. Tranquil Gardens is my kind of goofy Facebook page. I still call it Facebook. See?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And or you can find me Soleil Tranquilli. Tranquilli is not a very common name around here.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That's
know.
my personal and. There's a little potty mouth, but we have some fun. We make fun of horticulture stuff. We work hard and we try and get educated and have a laugh. So.
Good. Yeah. Well, thanks for being on. Like I said, I've learned a lot. And until next time, everyone, happy gardening.